Ladies and gentlemen, the lunch. Usually there is a danger of falling asleep after delicious and heavy meal. But since we have chosen such an interesting topic, I'm sure that all of you will stay wide awake. As the title of the second session, we have chosen Building a Peace Regime in East Asia, Vision and Prospect. Allow me to introduce the session chair and paper presenters. The session chair will be His Excellency Kong No-myung, former Foreign Minister of Republic of Korea, who is now the chairman of Sejong Foundation. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Thank you.
And as a paper presenter, we have invited, first of all, Ambassador Evgeny Afanasyev from the Embassy of Russian Federation in Thailand. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause. And we have also invited His Excellency Hong Sun-young, former Foreign Minister, who is also President of Korean Council on Foreign Relations. Please welcome former Foreign Minister Hong. Chairman Kim Hak-soo of Asia Economic Community Foundation is with us also. Please welcome Chairman Kim Hak-soo. Last but not least, we have two more guests. First of all, President Charles Morrison from East-West Center of the United States of America. Finally, former Vice Foreign Minister Wang Ying-feng from People's Republic of China. Please welcome them with a warm round of applause. And the mic is now yours, His Excellency Kong No-myung.
Thank you. Tight schedule this afternoon. Already 10 minutes left, and we have to complete this session by 3:20. And I have 7 speakers to present this afternoon. So simple mathematics tell me that each speaker has 10 minutes to present their view. And I don't have much time really to waste. Therefore, I would like to ask Ambassador Afanasyev to speak on this issue. And as you know, Ambassador Afanasyev, sorry, was an ambassador to Korea. He was here since 1997 for 4 years, and now he's Russian ambassador to Thailand. And he is a graduate of GIMO, the Moscow Institute for Foreign Relations. And he worked on various fields in Soviet ministry, mainly on Asia and the United States. While he was in the United States, he was served under the famous Soviet ambassador Dobrynin. And many Soviet diplomats who served in Washington often proudly call, I'm the disciple of Dobrynin. And without exception, Ambassador Afanasyev is also one of the disciples of Ambassador Dobrynin. Would you kindly go up to the rostrum to speak? Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kong No-myung. It's a great honor for me to be here in this conference and in this panel with such distinguished participants. I would present kind of my own view coming from Southeast Asia about what peace regime might look like in this area of the world. And when we speak about East Asia, I would argue that we should speak in a broader terms, not just East Asia proper, but East Asia plus Southeast Asia, plus, of course, countries that have major interests here, like United States, of course, Russia. The debate is still going on where Russia belongs to. For example, inside ASEM, for 10 years, I think, impossible discussions, is Russia a European country or is Russia Asia country? We are both. We are European, Euro-Asian countries. Because Vladivostok, our Pacific port, is just 2 hours flight from Jeju Island. And of course, we have Moscow, St. Petersburg, other places in Europe. So I think we should look broader into Asia and Pacific picture when we speak about peace regime in this region. Second, I would like to say that we should not speak just about peace regime. Peace is not enough in this area of the world as well as in others. I think we should better speak about peace, security, and cooperation. This is a more ambitious goal, but we should strive for it because we live in the most dynamic, most rapidly developing area of the world. I agree also that I personally think that if we look back at few years, maybe 10 years now, we had tremendous opportunity to build permanent peace and stability in this region. But I personally think we all failed. If we look at what's going on in this region, certainly we didn't have major military conflict, major wars, and we are fortunate to do it, that we didn't have it. But basically, up to now, we discuss the same things we should have been discussing 10 or 15 years ago. And we are facing still the same problems in this area. This is not my task to blame anyone, any single country or leaders for that situation. But I think not only one country or one leader is responsible for that. Maybe there are several countries or people responsible for this situation. But my task is, what should we do for the future of this region? I think that Asia has some unique characteristics, and East Asia in particular, because we have such a diversity of history, levels of economic developments, religion, culture, and actually we have already a kind of polycentric world in this part of the world. And I would argue that this is a good, this is a plus, to build system based on new principles. After the end of the Cold War, after the end of the ideological confrontation between former Soviet Union and the United States, we have many opportunities now to build such a system. Another reason is that, as I told, as everybody knows, East Asia is one of the fastest developing region of the world, even despite current economic crisis. This is a place of gradually shifting trade, investment, and financial flows, growing bilateral and multilateral free trade areas. Also, we have a host of regional organizations, some more active, some less active, but we have already some mechanism in place. Also, the rapidly growing economies of China and India is a new factor. Russia also, before the crisis, was developing very well. Now we have somewhat slowed down, but I am sure we will be a major factor in this region in the years to come. Certainly ASEAN, the place where I come from, this is a new center of world politics and economy being formed in this part of the region. I would say if ASEAN countries will complete their goals by the year 2015 and beyond, we will have some centers of, I would say, economic and political powers comparable to other big countries in the region or other big regions in the world. So this is, of course, a new factor. Another important factor is Russia, especially its Far Eastern and Siberia regions, will be developing faster in the years ahead. We have a huge potential there. Probably, if we speak about natural resources of Russia, so probably one of the richest in the world. Not yet fully utilized, of course, but natural gas, oil, all kind of raw materials, plus high-tech industries, space, aviation, others. This can serve not only Russia and Russian development, but also the whole region. Also, I think that we should speak about kind of inter-organizational forums, where we have, in addition to APEC, many others, like IRF Forum, like Shanghai Organization of Cooperation, like, say, ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN plus 6. There is also an idea of new Australian Prime Minister to create a regional-wide security and cooperation organization. I understand that Honorable John Howard this morning had some skeptical remarks about this, but I personally think we should think for the future. It might take years, but in Asia we don't have yet structures comparable to European structures. And this is a minus that had to be somehow dealt with in the future. So I think we will have good prospects for cooperation in this region if we take a new approach. More tolerance, more patience, more personal diplomacy. And recent examples have shown us, if we speak about, say, North Korea, that personal diplomacy at high levels, real diplomacy, gives some results. So if we will all be smarter, I would say, wiser, use really diplomatic means, so we can potentially build a good, reliable system of peace and cooperation in this region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Afshinov. He emphasized that Russia should be a partner in this Asian region, and he particularly emphasized a new approach, the approach of patience, the human network, which I think is certainly one of the assets of diplomacy. The next speaker will be former Foreign Minister Hong Soon-young, who is a career diplomatic officer. He served Russia and China, and he was foreign minister from 98 to 2000, and he went to, after the foreign ministership, he went to China as an ambassador. At the moment, he's president of Korean Council on Foreign Relations, which is an association of Korean foreign service officers. Minister Hong, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and very good afternoon to you all. I will try to stick to my time limit, 10 minutes. My topic is, visions and prospects of peace regime building in East Asia. It seems that there is no consensus yet on how to build a peace regime in East Asia. However, the talk of building a peace regime in East Asia is not new. The topic of peace and stability in East Asia has been around for a long period of time and has been discussed in a variety of meetings among East Asian countries, including other countries as well. I'm going to present my own rough idea on this topic, expecting your indulgence. Before we begin discussions on how to build a peace regime in East Asia, we must first define the scope of East Asia and then outline the challenges or threat to peace in East Asia. After this, hopefully we may propose a regime for peace in East Asia and talk about what the ideals and values must be, as well as what principles must be adhered to in promoting and maintaining peace in the region. Then discussions on how we can cooperate toward this end of regime building can follow. First, I would start with the question of definition of East Asia. The East Asian region can be defined in several ways, but usually or habitually, the region, East Asian region, encompasses 3 countries in Northeast Asia, namely China, Japan, and Korea, and 10 member states of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which has more than 40-year history. ASEAN members and the 3 Northeast Asian countries have had rather a long history and close relations among them, and are still connected in many ways. These countries together can be classified as the East Asian community, and can concentrate on peace regime in East Asia. However, the nations that must take part in the peace regime in East Asia may also include those nations that are not geographically part of East Asia. Nations with firm and ongoing associations with the countries in East Asia in peace and security affairs could be invited to participate. I'm saying this with the United States in my mind. However, other countries such as Russia or Mongolia, for many reasons, may be invited to this peace regime as well. Now talking about challenges or threat to peace in East Asia. The first serious challenge to peace in East Asia at the moment is North Korea's nuclear program in the divided Korean Peninsula. There are other challenges to peace as well in East Asia, and it will be good to raise these and other issues and discuss them openly in the peace regime when the regime is established. But today, I prefer to focus on North Korean nuclear program because it is today's issue. North Korea's nuclear program has a long history. In December of 1991, South and North Korea adopted the joint declaration for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. However, in March of 1993, the North Korea withdrew from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, in abbreviation, and declared it would go ahead with its nuclear weapons program. But in October of 1994, after some negotiations, the United States and North Korea signed the Geneva Framework Agreement, which stated that the U.S. would provide 2 light water reactors to North Korea, and North Korea would freeze and eventually dismantle the Yongbyon nuclear reactor. However, in time, North Korea's nuclear ambitions resurfaced, and the tensions escalated between the two nations, which are the United States and North Korea. Then in October of 2006, North Korea went ahead with its first nuclear test. And in April of 2008, missiles claimed as satellites by the North Korean regime were launched. We started to suspect at that time that North Korea's most cherished goal lied in being acknowledged as a nuclear power, and that North Korea found the nuclear arms as a guarantee to national security. And again in April 2009, which is this year, North Korea launched its satellite missiles and showed the world that it had a long-distance missiles capability. North Korea, again the same year, conducted its second nuclear test in May. In reaction to this, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution imposing sanctions on North Korea the next month, which was June. So the challenge is still there. North Korea's possessions of nuclear arms will not only be a threat to South Korea, but also a serious challenge to the political and the security order in East Asia and the entire world. Countries such as Korea, Japan, China, the United States, and Russia, the same countries that make up the six-party talks, must stand up to the challenge. North Korea's nuclear armament is not simply an issue specific to nations such as Korea or Japan, but an issue to all of East Asia and the entire world. The fact is that now more than ever, a country's security is guaranteed when there is a peace and stability in its surrounding communities. Because peace and stability of a nation can be compromised by what goes on in its neighboring countries, I think there should be continuous dialogue on peace and stability among the countries in the region, and that likewise, therefore, a peace regime should and could exist in many different forms. What must be underlined here is that a country that is not geographically located in East Asia, but partakes in the establishment and maintenance of peace in the region, must be a player in this peace regime. The United States is not geographically located in the region, but politically and militarily linked to the region and can be considered as an Asian country for the purpose of the peace regime. The presence of the United States will be hopefully taken and welcomed in the context of China-US partnership for peace. And also with Japan present in the peace regime in East Asia, the big three nations together will play the leadership role in peacemaking in East Asia. Now coming back to the North Korean issue, hopefully one can foresee the day when North Korea will participate in the peace regime in East Asia. The underpinning for South Korea's policy toward North Korea is peaceful coexistence. Peaceful coexistence means exchange and cooperation between the two nations, two Koreas. When North Korea moves ahead with the denuclearization, declares a new regime of reform and an open door policy, North Korea will be invited to join the peace regime in East Asia. Both Koreas are independent members in the United Nations. When coexistence and cooperation become a reality, perhaps both Koreas may even sign a free trade agreement. This could be followed by the talks of reunification. Such a development will take place within the framework of the East Asian peace regime. Finally, I would present my thinking about the ideas and the values of East Asia. Behind the ideas to establish and manage a peace regime in East Asia lies the shared hope of peace and prosperity for all nations involved. The titles and the institutions or systems of political and economic affairs of each nation may differ, but I guess those nations altogether strive or move toward the big historical standard of upholding and promoting freedom and dignity. This is the trend of history, I hope. Therefore, there may be a need to discuss about the values behind the political and economic systems and the issues of freedom and human dignity. I believe such discussions can take place within the framework of a peace regime. And one can guess that the nations at hand will pursue such values in accordance with their own culture and timetable. In this regard, I believe reconfirming and declaring such historic trends will be helpful to the unity and the cooperation in the East Asian community. With all this prospect in mind, I hope the Asian countries will define themselves and try building a peace regime in East Asia and in accordance with the trend of the times. With this, I close my presentation. Thank you very much for your listening. I spent much time on the North Korean issue, but this is this is I hope what I had to do, because that is the question of the present time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Hong. Although we are running a little bit behind time, our next speaker will be Dr. Kim Hak-soo, who is currently chairman of the Asian Economic Community Foundation. Dr. Kim is a graduate of Yonsei, and he obtained a degree of PhD from University of South Carolina. He has a very unique career among 7 of our speakers today. He has public and private sector experience. He one time was a country representative of Teo Business Group, and he had a Master of Philosophy. And here is a Master of Philosophy, isn't it? Yes, of Edinburgh University. And did I say he was Secretary General of ISCAP? He served as an international civil servant. Dr. Kim, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Kong, for your very nice and kind introduction for me. My presentation subtitled Addressing New Security Threats. East Asia region, whether it is ASEAN plus 3 or ASEAN plus 6, is most dynamic, relatively well developed, but not well institutionalized to collectively address various new security threats. My presentation will firstly look at the new global security threats, followed by the brief review of existing multi-track intergovernmental frameworks, and then attempt to suggest several scenarios. First, new security threats and implications to East Asia. The United Nations report of the Secretary General's high-level panel on threats, challenges, and change 2004 identified the following 6 clusters of threats with which the world must be concerned now and in the decade ahead. 1. Economic and social threats, including poverty, infectious disease, and environmental degradation. 2. Interstate conflict. 3. Internal conflict, including civil war, genocide, and other large-scale atrocities. 4. Nuclear, radiological, chemical, and biological weapons. 5. Terrorism. 6. Transnational organized crime. The first economic and social threat is more concerned with developmental disparity, that is, widening gaps between the rich and the poor countries. This threat is well reflected in the Millennium Declaration by the head of state in September 2000, and more articulated in the Millennium Development Goals. Second, traditional security threat has been centered around interstate conflict or war between the states after the end of Second World War, and somehow prevailed throughout the Cold War era. However, there were fewer interstate wars in the last half of the 20th century than in the first half. Despite the birth of many new states, the number of states having grown almost fourfold, from 51 in 1945 to 192 in 2008. Nevertheless, the prevention of this interstate conflict remains main priority of the international community. Third, internal conflict became more serious since the end of the Cold War. Peacemaking, peace building, and post-conflict peace building in civil wars have become the operational phase of the United Nations in international peace and security. The United Nations provided leadership, opportunities for negotiation, strategic coordination, and the resources needed for implementation, yet with mixed results of successes and failures as well. Fifth, terrorism attacks the very universal values of the UN Charter, such as respect for human rights, the rule of law, the rules of war that protect civilians, tolerance among peoples and nations, and the peaceful resolution of conflict. Terrorism flourishes in environments of despair, humiliation, poverty, political oppression, extremism, and human rights abuse. Sixth, transnational organized crime is now further expanded from drug trafficking and money laundering to human and illicit arms trafficking, which erodes human security and the fundamental obligation of states to provide for law and order. Although the above-mentioned 6 threats are more relevant in the global context and selected as of 2004, some of them are more acute and peculiar to East Asia security threats. If they may be rearranged and chosen among the above-mentioned threats in terms of priority from the East Asian perspective, the orders can be a little bit rearranged as follows. 1. Nuclear, radiological, chemical weapons. 2. Economic and social threats, particularly environmental degradation. 3. Transnational organized crime. 4. Terrorism. 5. Others such as internal conflict and interstate conflict. My second title of multi-track frameworks for dealing with East Asia security threats. Historically, East Asian countries have not actively involved and developed collective intergovernmental frameworks to deal with regional security issues until recently. Most of recently established intergovernmental bodies such as APEC 1989, ASEM 1996, and ASEAN Plus 3 1997 are all more oriented towards economic cooperation. However, some of them, such as ARF 1994, even ASEM 1996, and ASEAN Plus 3 1997, dealt with security issues, perhaps opening up for future development. First, ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF. Established in 1994 with 17 membership, later expanded to 27. According to the concept paper, 3 stages were specified. 1, promotion conflict building measures. 2, development of preventive diplomacy mechanism. 3, gradual approach to conflict resolution. However, since ARF was launched under the auspices of ASEAN, rules and regulations, rules and procedures, and its secretarial services are supported by ASEAN Secretariat. Although it is regarded loose consultation, ARF is unique in raising security issues. Second, ASEM, Asia-Europe Meeting. Established in 1996 as reactionary response to APEC, ASEM covers not only economic and social aspects, but also political areas of Korean Peninsula, human rights in Myanmar, international terror, weapons of mass destruction, transnational crimes, and natural disasters. Initially 25 members, now expanded to 45 as of 2008. Unlike the APEC, ASEM specifies the political and security areas for cooperation, recently including climate change, food security, and strengthening multilateralism, etc., under the Foreign Ministers' meeting. Third, ASEAN